Of course, it's a very interesting process. That's what I love to do it, because then you can try to put in your music what you hear in your head, but at the same time, what you put in the music tells you what you are hearing. So it's not a process that goes only in one way, but in two ways.
Welcome to another episode of The Way They Listen. Glad you're here. And our guest today is Darwin Aquino. We're very lucky to have him. He's a composer and conductor and is going to talk to us about his composing side of life today, we hope. And we're very fortunate to have you, so thank you.
Thank you, Clay. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you for the invitation, and I really love your series, the wonderful work that you are doing in YouTube.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's a lot of fun, and I get to talk to people like you about music. So that's the awesome part. So before we get it, we're going to get into some specific pieces here and some new stuff that you're working on, right?
I've been composing music since I was a little kid in my country, the Dominican Republic. And since those moments, I've been able to introduce folkloric music of my island into my compositions. That is something that I love, something that I am very passionate about. And even in my recent compositions that I've composed here in the city of St. Louis, you can still find those pieces of popular music of my country. And I am very excited to talk to you today about how we composers listen to music and how with the sound that we have in our minds, how we can create new things and how we can combine all those processes into our creative life.
Does it feel different in your mind than when you're composing, say, a classical piece of music or something that does not incorporate folk music or tunes or those feelings, like you said, from when you were a child?
Yeah, definitely it's different because when you compose inspired in folkloric music, you always have recordings that you listen to because that music is already there. So you are kind of reinventing that music with new sounds, new textures. Maybe you change the harmony, maybe you change the melody, and that's the way that then we can introduce that music that is already there. That is, it's not yours. It's from the people. It's from a country. So you can introduce then that music into your compositions. The other way to do it, as you say, when you are composing abstract music that you are not using any popular elements, it's totally different because then you are the full creator of that music, and every note and every sound that comes out is yours. But I have always loved, I don't know why, to listen to music that is out there, sometimes even sounds of nature, and to see how can I introduce that in my music. It's always that I've always been intrigued. You know, it's something that is maybe entertaining for me in a way as a composer to try to do.
Hmm. Like you hear whale sounds or you hear nature sounds or you hear the sirens in the background here because we're in the middle of the city. Like, what is it about the sound of that like inspires an entire composition? Because we don't think of that as musical, but there is something that you hear or like, like Hovannes heard that, is inspiring.
Yes, I believe that is the moment when you are hearing something and what is surrounding that moment. So maybe in a moment that you are quiet or in a moment that you are thinking of something specific, a sound comes and you are impressed by that, or some music comes and then you associate. I mean, at least that is what happens to me. I associate that sound that is coming to my life with something that I am living right at that moment. And then it's meaningful after that to include it in your compositions because it means something to you, because all of the sudden it's part of your life. So sometimes it's not about a specific sound or melody that you hear, but the moment and what is going on in your life. Because we all, as creators, we just put out there what we have inside us, all our feelings, or all our expressions, and that is very related to the present in a composer. What are you living? What's happening in your life? So, for example, in one of my recent pieces, of course, I'm putting the music that I sing to my baby because now we have a 4 month old, and that is the moment that we are living. And for me, it's so meaningful to include what I sing to him in my composition. So it's kind of that relationship that I find when I listen to music that is not mine, but it comes from outside.
You have a new piece coming out for flute and violin. Just tell us about it.
Yeah, so I am very happy, and this is kind of a premiere that I have for you or your show. My piece for violin and flute, the name is Una Isla Dos Mundos. That means in Spanish, one island, two worlds. And it's gonna be released. It's gonna be published by Cayambi's Music Press here in the United States, and that is a very special institution because it dedicates only to Latin American music, to the new music of my part of the world. And I'm very excited. I'm very happy because that piece will be published, and then everyone can have access to buy the score. And it's a piece from 2016, actually. It was premiered at the Latin American Festival of Music in Venezuela. And besides having a flute player and a violin, a player that play many difficult passages and also extended techniques in the instrument, I think that this piece is kind of different because it has percussion instruments as well. So you hear this Caribbean sound in it because the flute has to play the triangle, the wind chimes, and also needs to play what we call the caja. That is a cajon that sounds like a drum. It's a Latin American drum. And the violin needs to play the bongos, needs to play also the wind chimes, and has a whistle in his mouth. So at the same moment that they are playing their instruments, they need to play also percussion instruments. And I really love this piece. It's very close to my heart because it's inspired not only in the music of my country, the Dominican Republic, but also in the folkloric music of Haiti. As you know, we share an island, Dominican Republic and Haiti,
Right.
and our folkloric music is so similar that I wanted to dedicate a piece actually to our identity because you can see how close we are musically. And in this piece is about exploring all of that.
Let's hear a little bit of it. I want to hear it now. So tell us about this opening, man. It's such a cool piece. I want to remind the audience, we will put links down in the description
Okay, I think
for
that's
this,
great.
and you can find the video there in the description. And also, when the piece becomes available for purchase, we'll put the publisher information down
Oh,
there in the
thank you. I
description.
appreciate that. Well, this opening is about music from the Dominican Republic that is called Gaga. And that is our African heritage. And actually, the wind chimes that are in the middle of both players symbolizes the frontier that we have in the middle of the island. And as you can see, both players are asked to play the wind chime, so kind of sharing the frontier of our island. And as you can hear, the bongos have very specific rhythms from the Dominican Republic. And also, when the flute plays the caja, all those rhythms are part of our folkloric heritage. And the colors that we hear is the sonorities and the noises and whistles and whisperings and that you can find in a popular celebration of folkloric music in my country. So when you go to those places, people is singing music, people is celebrating, people is having rituals, but also there is a lot of noise. It's a popular celebration. So also the texture of the piece goes into that sense. So maybe that connects with what we were talking previously, that when I go to places, I not only listen to the music that is coming to me, if it is a musical manifestation, but I'm listening to the surroundings, any noise, any sound of nature, anything that I can pick up makes an impression on me, and I try to then put it in my music.
Hmm. Even minus all the noise, because we're talking about you know, two nations, two peoples, two heritages, and the frontier and the festival and all this. And how do you, the composer, narrow that down to, I mean, there's, one, two, three, four, there's five instruments there. There's just two players. How do you decide? What do you hear in your head that says, okay, now that is the part that should go there? Because it must sound like something, you have this vision. Where does that come from? Or how do you decide?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And it's a process that takes time.
Hmm.
And as a composer, personally, I start preparing what I call a project. And I start putting ideas down in a music stuff. Some of those ideas are not even music, but words and impressions and things that I hear in my head. And then with time, I start selecting which of those elements I am actually gonna use in my piece. So sometimes people think that composition is an inspiration, which it is, but it's only at the beginning. Composition is an inspiration of a couple of seconds. I want to do this. But then after that, you need to plan your piece. There, of course, you have studied composition, you have some techniques to do it, and the organization of those melodies or those rhythms or those materials then enter into the game. Of course, it's a very interesting process. That's what I love to do it, because then you can try to put in your music what you hear in your head, but at the same time, what you put in the music tells you what you are hearing. So it's not a process that goes only in one way, but in two ways. Sometimes you are composing and you are hearing what you are writing, but that doesn't necessarily is what you have in your mind. And then maybe after you see it in the score, you say, "Oh, but this sounds great, and this sounds great, and I like it." So it's a very flowing process. It doesn't come out in one day or two, and your pieces. I mean, you could end up uh, spending months or years
Right.
composing one piece, and that is the beauty of the process. I think.
But was there ever a time when you heard something or you played something and it, either something in your past or in your present, that it it did connect in that moment, and it stayed, like it was just like that that reminds me of this thing that happened or this thing that's going on, and it stuck, and that's it. It didn't change.
Yes, there is a very special piece of music, again from my country, from our folkloric music, that is called Ae Mamasie. It's a very special and beautiful popular chant. And that melody that I heard, I remember in a popular manifestation in maybe 2002, 2003, I don't even remember when, stuck with me until today because it has many meanings for me. Uh, and it started to enter in my music in a piece that I have for orchestra, for large orchestra, that by the name of Espacio Ritual. It's a piece from 2007 that is officially the first time that I quote that song Ae Mamasie in my music. But it's very interesting that, for example, in this year 2020, I am composing a piece for percussion for the University of Michigan for a commission that I have been honored to have because they are going to record a CD of Latin American music for percussion, and I have been included as one of the composers.
Oh wow!
And
Congratulations, that's
thank
awesome.
you, thank you. And that piece, the name of that piece is Ae Mamasie, and it
Hmm.
uses the same song that I was using 13 or 14 years ago. And in other pieces, I believe that my music is kind of a work in progress because one piece ends, and then sometimes the piece that continues connects with the music that just ended the other piece. And that song has been present in many of my pieces. In my violin concerto, for example, is the second movement of the concerto. Of course, always different, as we are talking, always with some elements that are different. Always, me as a composer, listening to that, the way we listen, listening to that in different ways, so I can recreate different scenarios and different sensations in the music that I compose.
Hmm. Wow. All right, let's listen to some more of this piece.
Dos mundos.
Going back to what you said, you have to work so hard on this. You have to work through it. There's the little bit of inspiration or a lot of inspiration at the beginning, but then there's all of the composition stuff, and then you may not hear it live or hear it with actual players until weeks, months, years. You know, what's that like when you finally do hear it, and did it come out like what you imagined? And I was going to ask you specific about this piece because at the opening of this movement, where the flute sounds so folkloric, it's almost cinematic, and then the violin is in sort of stark contrast to that. It seems like how do you go, okay, this is going to work, or is it going to sound cliche, or that contrast has been done before, but it wasn't cliche. It's gorgeous. How do you or do you just like guess or?
Well, I believe that we composers, we are always scared of our music because you might have in your mind 40, 50%, 60% of what you compose, if you are a great and wonderful composer, it's actually almost impossible to have 100% of what you put in the music in your head. Of course, with pieces that are for one instrument or two or three, it's easier to do than for a full orchestra. To control every sound in your mind that you are putting in a full orchestra is really, really difficult. Of course, with training, you can do it more or less, but we are always scared, and that is the reality of what is gonna sound when you hear the piece for the first time. And we are always surprised with the results. I've never been in a performance of my piece, in a premiere of one of my pieces, that I have said that is completely what I wanted to compose. And at the same time, I've never been in a premiere that I have said, oh, that is not what I composed. So you always find elements that went really great and you are so happy about them,
Right.
and some elements that didn't. And sometimes it's the contrary. You think that this part was going to be great and it's a disaster, and this part that you thought it was a disaster when you composed it is great and sounds wonderful. So, as I said, we are the first ones that are surprised many times with the results of our pieces, especially when you compose contemporary music, as it is this piece, for example, that you are using extended techniques. And actually, every performer, every player does them differently. And you can actually not control how they are going to do it or in what intensity they are going to do it. Of course, with classical music, as we know it, it's easier to have in your mind the idea of what is going to sound because there are less risks involved in the way that we play the instruments. So I need to confess, as a composer, and many composers will say the same, that you cannot have full control of what you compose. And at the end of the day, you are also receiving new information and new input every time that you hear your music. Not only the first time, but every time that you listen to the piece is
Right.
also a learning experience for you, and something new is always out there.
Hmm. No, I was just sitting here thinking about what you said while I was listening to it about how you're pulling in sounds, and we sort of think of that as well, I don't think people think of it as a gimmick, but it's real. Like it's like a real thing where you hear sounds that are around you that you incorporate. So in this movement specifically, a lot more fast playing, a lot more, it seems like a lot more advanced technique. And by the way, I apologize for miscounting the instruments. I didn't, I missed the triangle and the whistle when I was, those guys are doing a lot up there. So tell us about this movement.
Yeah, well, you are right. The piece is four very short movements, kind of miniatures, we might say. And this is number three. And is already going back to the music of the Dominican Republic. We remember that we heard the first movement that was dedicated to the Gaga, and the second movement is dedicated to the Rara, the music of Haiti, and this goes back to the first one. So now we hear the whistle, and it's a challenge for the violinist to do it and to play at the same time very fast and kind of virtuoso passages that he has. So the whistle, of course, in the folkloric music of my country, is something that people uses and people uses freely, while other
Hmm.
people is dancing and singing and playing percussion instruments. Many people take to those manifestations whistles, and I
Really?
thought of including that in the music just
Hmm.
to give to the music the color of a celebration.
Hmm.
And the music goes back to some textures, some noises, we might say, some extended techniques that the instrument used to recreate that we are in an open space. And that is actually one of the things that I wanted in the piece, that we can feel that we are in a public gathering where any sound, any noise, any interaction can come freely to us.
Hmm. It's so easy to indulge ourselves in those extended techniques, and to put them in because they're neat or we just like the way they sound or they sound cool. Is there anything that you think to yourself like, okay, I know this is really contributing artistically to this piece, and so it's going to stay.
Yeah, definitely, as you say, extended techniques could be abused
Mm.
in composition. There are some pieces that you listen to them and you say, "Well, I cannot listen to this not one more minute because I'm tired. I'm
Mm.
tired of all the things that I'm hearing at the same moment." You do use them in this piece a lot. In other pieces, I don't actually. I try to avoid them
Hmm.
because every piece has a different concept,
Right.
and the composer should follow mainly the purpose of each piece. So in this one, I guess it's according to what I'm trying to put out there, because as we have mentioned before, when we go to a folkloric manifestation, at least in my country, it's open air, it's kind of a party, it's kind of a celebration. So I believe that those techniques and those sonorities in this
Hmm.
piece go very well to recreate that. And for example, when you hear the whistle in the piece, it does you don't you are not uh, you are not surprised to hear the
Hmm.
whistle because it's part of other
That's right. You're
sonorities
not.
that the violin and the flute are doing since the beginning. And also the percussion instruments. I mean, at some part, all that is integrated in the sonority, and you don't feel it as an element that is out of of the environment. So I believe that that is the success
Hmm.
maybe of extended techniques, if you can include it as a musical language, and it is supporting the concept of your piece. I think that that is when the composer can say, yes, I can use this and it's going to work out fine.
Hmm. No, you're absolutely right. It didn't strike me as being, I mean, I didn't even notice it as being like extra or anything like that. It was just like a part of the piece. I never even thought about that. Huh. What? I couldn't. What did they say at the end?
They say the title of the piece, Una
Mm,
Isla Dos Mundos. So that happens at the end of the second movement, and now it happens again at the end of the piece. And as we can hear, that little melody that is so nice is completely tonal, nothing weird about that
it's
melody.
it's like a
Very
hymn.
is a folkloric tune from Haiti. So that's why in the piece is in the second movement and comes back at the end. But definitely it is the center of the piece because it's the part that we can recognize the most if it is a tonal tune,
Right.
and it's very easy to remember. And is actually I heard that tune in a recording. So in the piece, it is played in the same way that they do it in Haiti. Actually, it's played by a trumpet in the
Huh.
original recording, and then I thought of introducing that same music in the piece, and it is of kind of the central theme, if
Right.
we can say that, of this entire composition, and that's why it comes back at the end with the title of the piece, Una Isla Dos Mundos. One island, two worlds.
Hmm.
It's something that is part of our culture, our society, and I wanted to dedicate a piece that explores about it. Is inspired, in that situation that we have had for centuries,
Yeah.
actually. Yeah.
Yeah. For a long time. Um, you mentioned another piece before we run out of time here, because it's funny that I wanted to ask you about the Espacio Ritual, and then you mentioned it there while we were talking about it, and I'll play a little bit of it for our audience here. But um, that piece, by contrast, is uh, for a lot of players
Yes.
because there's a lot there's a lot going to just tell us a little bit about it.
Yes, I mean, it's a piece that is very close to my heart. I am very proud of it. And the title is Espacio Ritual, which means ritual space for full orchestra. As we say, it has five percussion players, full brass, full woodwinds. Woodwinds not in pairs, but three woodwinds per or four per section, and a very big string section as well. And the piece is, as you say, is very noisy, is very big, is
But it's
very
wonderful. I
powerful.
mean, I heard it, and it's just it's amazing. Just remind the audience, we'll put links to all this stuff into Darwin's website down in the description. But no, I mean it's a fantastic piece, and I hope everyone will go and listen to the whole thing, and this one as well. But yeah, no, sorry, yeah,
Yeah,
continue.
thank you for all those comments, Clay. And the piece was commissioned in my country for the Santo Domingo Music Festival in 2007, and then it was selected by the Simón Bolívar Orchestra of Venezuela to be performed in the Latin American Music Festival in 2010. That is the recording that we have that the people can enjoy. But then after that, in 2015, it was selected in France in the Festival Prisons, and the Orchestra Philharmonic of Radio France in La Maison de Paris did the European premiere of this piece. So I am very proud of it because from hundreds of composers around the world that are studied, that are investigated for this huge festival, I was selected.
Oh wow.
And Espacio Ritual had a premiere by a top European orchestra. And the piece, the language of the piece, kind of similar to Una Isla Dos Mundos, but of course is different because it's for a very powerful orchestra, and it's a textural piece. So the you are not gonna find a melody or a theme, but you are gonna find different textures, different sonorities, maybe a little hint of folkloric music. But I believe even it's more difficult to find it than in Una Isla Dos Mundos. Back in those days, I was coming back from Strasbourg in France, where I studied contemporary composition. So my head was full of crazy things and new sonorities, and also reflects that part of my life as a composer.
You say that, but then the in Una Isla and the other one, you weave the textures together so well that they become thematic. I mean, it doesn't, you say, oh, it's not thematic or it's not musical, but I mean, it is musical because we're sitting there and we're listening to it and we're enjoying it. How do you think? I mean, how does that happen? That these sort of just bits and pieces of sound somehow turn into a melody.
Well, I'm happy to hear that, because actually that is what we are looking for as composers, that the textures become music in a way, and people can follow them, and people can relate them, and people can enjoy them. And actually that is the work of the composer after the inspiration, what we were talking. Then you need to sit to organize the structure of your piece. It's like building a house. You need to know where the kitchen is, you need to know where the living room is, the hallway that is going to take you to a new room. So we organize the structure, we organize registers, entrance of the instrument, so we can actually connect all the elements. And I believe that behind a good composition, there is always a justification of why something is happening. And I believe that this is very important for us as composers to communicate with our audiences. And that is related to the way we listen. Because when someone listens to a piece for the first time, you cannot say what's going on sometimes, but you can feel connections. And those connections are there because the composer is is making them happen. So I believe that that is extremely important, how you organize your project, how you at the end of the day put all the music materials that you have selected into one big speech that starts and ends in a frame of time.
I
That's what we do.
that's so, that feels so new to me. I never thought of a piece that way where you have all these things, but then do you feel like those structural elements, you say you're building this foundation. Do you think that those structural elements, I mean, you kind of said this, help the audience, like help the audience along so that they hear all these textures as music?
Yeah, absolutely. Because in a way or another, your music is like a speech. So you need to have sentences, you need to have paragraphs, you need to have structure. I mean, it's a dialogue and you are communicating something. You need to organize your music in a way that people can understand the organization. Even if they exactly don't know what's happening, they need to feel that they just heard a sentence, that this is a paragraph, that now I'm moving to a new section of the piece, or I'm moving to a new sonority. So even if we don't have those melodies that we can follow or relate, the piece needs to have a structure. And actually, that is the toughest work of the composer, and it's something that we need to do before we start composing, because if not, you can get lost in the way, and then the results, the realization of your piece, I think, is it doesn't come out that well.
Why help the audience? I mean, I'm just speaking hypothetically, like, you're a great artist, you're a great musician, you know what you want, and it's this fabulous creation. Why shouldn't the audience just figure it out on their own and come to you? Why help them?
I think that there always should be a good connection with the audiences. And I honestly don't like contemporary music or avant-garde music that doesn't think of audiences, because music is meant to communicate, and to communicate what you have inside you, for another person to receive that, and also is going to put that inside them. So that's how I do it. That's how I like to do it. I always want to find an element that in with which I can communicate to people.
Hmm.
And I believe and that a good composer always can do that. And that's why we have great music in the past that no matter in what language, no matter where you are, you can relate, you can communicate to that music. I think that we composers, we can never break that privilege that we have of connecting with other human beings. And our music needs to find ways to do that.
Is there something from your life, either early on or recent, could be any time, that inspires you to care so much about that connection? That is there something from your life that inspires you to always want to be communicating something and not just, you know, doing whatever?
Well, maybe is because of my country. We, as a country, our people, we communicate a lot. I mean, Latin Americans, we are always calling each other, we are always having gatherings, we are very loud, we like to integrate with people. So that has always been a part of me, in my family, with my friends, with the way that I see life and with the way that I relate to others. So I always want to communicate, I always want to feel connected. And I believe that that's why I do it also in my music. That even if it is difficult to hear, even if you have different textures and new sonorities, I always try to find a piece of music or a rhythm or a sonority that everyone can say, I can relate to that. And this is the music of Darwin Aquino from the Dominican Republic. I think that identity in a composer is very important because that is first should be who you are, and second should be what you do. And that's why I always try to put out there something that is me, something that is myself.
Wow, that's awesome. I know you have to go. I don't want to make sure that I let you go. Although I could do this for 3 more hours.